So, anyway, apparently, again, somebody is sending out emails with my name on them. And I will tell you right now, I have not emailed any of you, so block it. It's not me. You don't want to open it for whatever nefarious reasons they have. So, anyway, good to see all of you. We've got a nice large group. I set up a couple of extra tables for the stragglers, and I hope we fill them. So, a couple of quick announcements. MAC, Museum of Arts and Culture. We have an event coming up on May 16th, and I'm going to pass this around for all of you who are interested. So we have 5 speakers that are going to be speaking at the event from this group, and we will be setting up a table with our published works, and I think there's a few other people that will be there with us that will be not speaking. So they will be like the children of the group. They will be seen and not heard.
Right. That always works.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a challenge to the kids, right? Anyway, I'll pass this around and let y'all get a chance to look at it.
Bribe them with money.
I was given this story by persons unnamed, or shall remain unnamed. The king wanted to go fishing, and he asked the royal weather forecaster what the forecast was for the next few hours. The palace meteorologist assured him that there was no chance of rain. So the king and the queen went fishing. On the way, they met a man with a fishing pole riding on a donkey, and he asked the man if the fish were biting. The fisherman said, "Your Majesty, you should return to the palace. In just a short time, I expect a huge rainstorm." The king replied, "I hold the palace meteorologist in high regard. He is an educated and experienced professional. Besides, I pay him very high wages, and he gave me a very different forecast, and I trust him." So the king continued on his way. However, in a short time, a torrential rain fell from the sky, and the king and queen were totally soaked. Furious, the king returned to the palace and gave the order to fire the meteorologist. Then he summoned the fisherman and offered him the prestigious position of royal forecaster. The fisherman said, "Your Majesty, I do not know anything about forecasting. I obtain my information from my donkey. If I see my donkey's ears drooping, it means certainly that it will rain." So the king hired the donkey. And thus became the practice of hiring dumbasses to work in influential positions in government. And the practice is unbroken to this day. So anyway, I am going to turn this over to Sue. She also has an announcement that she would like to make, and she's going to introduce our guest speaker for the day.
Thanks, Carl. I don't know if it was last meeting or the meeting before, I brought 2 books from other members that were not able to be at the meeting, so they would be part of our display. I forgot to tell Larry, and he picked up my books, but he didn't know about the other 2, and I really want them back. I'm sure somebody picked them up and tried to keep them safe for me, but I haven't asked everybody yet. So one of them is kind of a soft colors, pastels on the cover, and it's an anthology of books. And it has a picture of my stepdaughter on the back, and she's got a story in there. And both of them are autographed to me. And the other one is Gail's children's book, Gail Saunders, who moved to Arizona. And it's about this little Christmas tree, and it's really cute, and I'd really like to have them back. So if you know of where they are, or whatever I'm not, I'm happy, but I'm hoping somebody from here got them so that they're safe. Anyway, that's all. And then, our speaker today is gonna be Dave McChesney, and then he's gonna talk about, standard format? Did I say that right? Okay, standard format. So, without further ado, here is Dave. We'll pass the torch. Oh, all right. I didn't notice you had a cup of coffee. So.
Well, it's water.
Oh, okay.
Couple speaking sessions ago, I got halfway through the session, I started getting dry and coughing, so now I'm always trying to make sure I got some water up here to go with.
Dave?
Yes.
The microphone out like this, it's a directional mic, you can't talk over the top of it.
Okay, more like that, is that
Yeah,
better?
more like that.
Okay, let's see what we got going here.
And the stand is there if you want to use it.
Pardon?
The microphone stand might make that easier.
I was thinking the last time I was up here, I used the stand and I kept doing like
Oh,
that,
yeah.
so I think this is gonna be easier where it can move around a little bit.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so let's begin. Hello, everybody, and thank you for allowing me to be your speaker again today. I'm always kind of amazed when I'm going to be the speaker and I show up and find this many people here, especially when you know I'm going to talk about something that might be kind of dry and boring, like standard format. And with that in mind, I've decided I'm not going to go through all the ins and outs of it. You know, what font you use, what font size, margin settings, and all that. I'd rather talk about just what it is, look at some of the reasons we might need to, or might want to use it in our own work if we don't, and also maybe use our imagination to come up with a little story as to how it came to be what it is today. Now, Monday, I think it was, I got an email from Joan, something about formatting, and I sent it off to everybody. You should have all got it. If you didn't, well, that's the way email works. But
Or does it?
let's see. I've got notes. I might as well follow them instead of trying to ad-lib. Okay, earlier this week I received an email from Joan, which I forwarded to you. This dealt with formatting a book for publication, whether printed or as an ebook. Just as, basically, that's what Sue's presentation last month was about, was setting a book up to be published. I want to point out the standard format deals with the manuscript.
Can you speak up a little bit? A little louder? I can't
Okay,
can't
I
hear
will try. I'm still trying to get used to this.
I know.
Okay,
Just give him some volume.
so where was I? Anyway, standard format deals with the manuscript for a book or other work. The item the author is going to submit for publication or work up to be published. Definition-wise, standard format is simply the way publishing, writing industry professionals, agents, editors, publishers, and others expect a manuscript to look when it's received by them. That expectation is so ingrained in them that typically a submission not in standard format will be rejected outright or given less consideration. It'll be set aside until, yeah, I've got time, I can look at this now. And that may seem harsh, but industry professionals read differently than we do. In fact, some people call them professional readers. They often have a large stack of submissions to go through. So they look for any reason to discard the one that's in front of them and move on to the next. It's not in standard format, rejected. If something in the story requires, if they get into the story and are reading it, if something causes them to have to reread a section or causes them to stop reading, that particular submission is done. We're going to go on to the next one. That's kind of the way the big name agents and acquisition editors and stuff work. So if you've decided to try and publish traditionally, or if you have an opportunity to submit to publish traditionally, it's a good idea to have your work in standard format. At least you know it's not going to be rejected before they even start reading it. Hey, we're done with one page already.
Standard format.
Okay. Should you decide to go with one of these companies that I call self-publishing service companies, I went with one called Outskirts Press when I first published my first 2 books. So ones where you send them in, they do all the work. They do everything just like a real publishing company, except you pay for it. They don't pay for it. But if you decide to publish with one of those, they might want to have what you send them in standard format. Largely because I would think a lot of the people working there come from the publishing industry and they're used to it. It's comfortable for them to work with standard format. Okay. Now, also, if a traditional publisher, if you get to the point with a traditional publisher where they're going to have one of their people edit it, or if that hybrid publisher or self-publishing service company is at the point where they're going to edit it, that editor would probably like to have the work in standard format. Again, it's because it's what everybody is used to. Additionally, some literary contests would prefer entries to be in standard format, and they might even require it. If I remember right from several years ago, what's known as the Gene M. Owl Literary Contest, which the PNWA puts on every year, it was required to be in standard format. And they changed some of the requirements on standard format a little bit too, so that the basic thing there is you don't want to have the author's name on the entry anyplace. It's a double-blind situation. So what's so great about standard format? Well, first of all, standard format puts you on a level playing field with all the other writers who might be submitting to that particular agent, who might be working with that particular hybrid publisher, or who are entering that particular literary contest. Manuscripts should all look the same. No one should be able to judge a submission or a manuscript based on its appearance. Manuscripts are thusly judged on their content, the quality of writing. Submitting your work in standard format also tells those who receive it that you are at least a little familiar with the writing and publishing industry. And every time I run through that thing about manuscripts being judged by their content rather than what they look like, I always think about the Martin Luther King quote about judging people by their character and not their color. Okay. Standard format can also help you determine story length. And I think we all know, or we should know, that story length is measured by word count, not by page count. Word count is absolute. 1,000 words is 1,000 words. It doesn't matter how the page actually is formatted. Not to say not to do standard format. We might be able to squeeze an entire 1,000 words onto a single sheet of paper. If we real small font size, single lines, wide margins. I don't know if I could read it, but I think we could do it. I think we could get 1,000 words on a single page. But we could also format that same 1,000 words to where it's going to take 10 pages to display it. Now, publishers and those people, they like to have an idea of a story's length, because that's how they determine how long the story is going to be in printed, published form, and that determines what the cost of publishing and printing is going to be. Now, today, with our computers, we can look down the screen and it'll tell us exactly how many words is in that particular document we're working at. We can highlight a portion of it and look down there and it'll tell you 500 to 1,500 words, something like that. You have an exact count. But what happened in the old days, back when manuscripts were written on a typewriter? Yeah, for something, say this is 6 pages more or less in standard format. I could probably go through and count all the words in there and tell you it's 2,000, basically 2,000 words. But I wouldn't want to do it for any of my 3 novels that I've written. They're 400 pages standard format. That's 100,000 words or more. I don't want to count to almost 500,000, but or 2/3 of a million, just to figure out word count. But over time, people figured out that you could have an average estimated word count per page. And it turns out that based on the old typewriters, that if the manuscript was typed with an elite typewriter, 12 characters per inch, you could have an average estimated word count of 250 words per page. If it was done with a Pica typewriter, 10 characters per inch, the average come out to be 200. And these are, like I said, they're averages or something to figure with. If you was to go through and do it on, say, on your manuscript or something, you might come up with, okay, my average word count is 248. Maybe somebody else do it's 272. It depends on the writing, and there's some other factors that apply in there. But those are the average word counts. So if you know how many pages is in your manuscript, in your standard format manuscript, you could use one of those 2 figures and come up with a fairly well guessed word count. And at one time, the sources that I was going through when I was still trying to traditionally publish suggested that editors and agents and stuff would rather have that estimated word count rather than the exact word count. And that might just be because of the way it was up until then. So anyway, a 400-page manuscript typed with an elite typewriter is about 100,000 words. If it's typed with a Pica typewriter, you'd have to go to 500 pages. And today, standard format has variants that equate or tie into either one of those 2 sizes that we talk about with typewriters. Standard format also facilitates editing, especially for those who like to edit on paper. Standard format has what I would call adequate to ample margins. We double space all our lines, and we only print or type on one side of a sheet of paper, theoretically. So we have plenty of room or white space for annotating errors, showing corrections, and even leaving detailed notes about what needs to be done to correct or improve the manuscript. And I think you see here, I actually printed this out so I don't have any, so the back pages are blank. So there's plenty of room in there where you can, well, that cross it out because it's spelled wrong, and if you know editing processes and stuff, there's certain signs and certain symbols you can use to indicate stuff. And even if you're, say, doing a critique read for somebody, and you come up where you have a really strong thing that you want to say about what they've written, either that's really good or it might cause them some problems later on, you've got a whole blank back page where you can write a note about it. Or if it's your own work, you can write a note, say, fix this later. Add this in, take this out. You have plenty of room there for it. Okay, I kind of consider that the first half of the presentation, because we've talked about what standard format is in basic terms, and we've looked at some of the reasons why we might want to use it. So let's look at how it came about. Let's use a little bit of imagination, and let's go back in history, back to when everything that existed was handwritten or hand printed. Everything was a manuscript by definition. If we wanted to duplicate something, we'd have to hire somebody or do it ourselves or get somebody there to copy letter by letter, word by word, page by page until they was done with it. And that's why books and other printed documents and other documents at that time were rare and they were expensive. That's why most of them were in some big library someplace. You wouldn't have a copy of such and such book yourself. You would go to the library and be afforded access to it to where you could read it. So in the 15th century, Gutenberg and others developed the idea of movable type. Now we could set the type for whatever we wanted to reproduce and print one copy, or thousands of copies of it. Now the expense of setting the type might have been kind of high. It might have been a lot of effort to set the type. But we could divide that cost by the number of copies printed. So if we spend $1,000 to set the type for something we want to have printed, and we print one copy, that copy is going to cost at least $1,000, not counting paper, ink, and labor. But if we printed 1,000 copies of it, now each copy only costs $1 for setting up the type, and we can figure in paper and ink and labor, which brings the overall cost of each book way down. Books became cheaper and or less expensive and more available. My big problem right now, if you haven't noticed, is I'm trying to follow this, but I'm trying not to read it. So once in a while I get lost, I get stuck in between two positions there. However, that original copy that went to the publisher or the printer or whoever was going to do something with it was still a handwritten manuscript. And that situation would continue on for another 400 years or so. And over that time, it's likely that certain ways of preparing and writing a manuscript came to be preferred. They would in fact be what we would call standard. And I think we can all kind of remember back to grade school and high school and stuff when the teachers would tell us there's certain ways of doing things, certain ways of laying out our papers, writing our papers, and that. It falls right along in that same thing there. Early 1870s, not long after the American Civil War, the first practical typewriters appeared. And it didn't take very long before somebody decided that he would send his next manuscript in as a typewritten document. Individual that did that, Samuel Clemens. We better know him as Mark Twain. And from everything I've been able to figure out, that first book that was submitted as a typewritten document was Life on the Mississippi. I have seen some references to it being The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and who knows, that was 100 and some odd 50 years ago or so, so facts get skewed over time. So I'm not aware of any reaction of those who received it, what the reaction might have been of those who received that first typewritten submission. But had I been back then, and had I submitted my next work as a typewritten document, I'm sure they would have been most grateful, perhaps even overjoyed. Now they would not have to try to interpret the chicken scratching that masquerades as my penmanship. And for the two or three of you that paid dues and just had me write out a receipt for you, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I can't even read it half the time. So they would actually be able to read what I sent them.
Sorry.
Besides legibility, typed manuscripts offered uniformity in letter size, letter spacing, making this idea of estimating word count more consistent and accurate. How many of you here ever took a typing class in school? Okay, when I went to school, we took eighth grade, we took a typing class. It was about a half year because it was split up. It was one of those classes that fell in between PE, so When the girls had their PE class, the boys had typing, vice versa, day to day. But
When I was in high school in Coeur d'Alene, they wouldn't let boys take typing, it
Oh,
was
yeah.
just for girls.
oh, now we had, this was down in Palouse, down south of town here. We did, well, I think I was 8th grade. 7th grade, girls took home ec, boys took shop class. Then in 8th grade, we all took typing. And we used to measure our word count. You would get a minute to type something, basically as fast as you can, and we'd count how many letters, spaces, and everything you'd use, divide by 5, and that was your word count. And because typewriters are non-proportional, no matter what letter you type, you're going to get the same number of characters across the page, across the line. So that helped make the idea of estimating word count a little more accurate, and a little more advanced there. And so I would suppose that most of those rules and stuff that had been derived for the handwritten manuscript carried over to the typewritten manuscript. Much of what could or couldn't be done with a typewriter was based on the capabilities and limitations of the typewriter. And as we moved into the 20th century, folks in the publishing business became accustomed to typewritten manuscripts and the way they were normally formatted. It's what they expected, and it's what they generally received. I'm going to step out of the character a little bit now. Okay, so in the late 1960s, I was in high school, not long after learning how to type, and had the first version of what would become the Stone Island Sea Stories stirring in my cranium. I eventually wrote it, first in pencil, then in pen, and finally I typed it. In the house, we had a desk reference book of some kind sitting around, and it had a section in there on setting up to type various types of documents. And I followed those guidelines, and looking back, I realized it was basically what we would now call standard format. Now, by the time I finished typing it, I was done with school and moved on with my life. I often thought of the story and sometimes made some mental images or mental edits and changes, but I didn't do a whole lot with it. It wasn't until the beginning of this century that I got back to working on it. And I realized it needed a lot of work, so I decided to start over and use our brand new computer. The capabilities of this computer were so much more than I remember from any of my experiences with computers and word processors while I was in the Navy. Now I could choose any of several fonts. I could select font sizes, I could choose the print color, I could bold, italicize, strike through, underline, and highlight. I could align it left, right, center, or I could justify it. I could, if I wanted, make my document, my manuscript, look like a page out of a printed book. And not really knowing any better, that's just what I did. I used the formatting I came up with for the entire manuscript of what would eventually become Beyond the Ocean's Edge. Last page. Okay. So when I finished it, I thought the story was pretty good and it might be worth trying to get published. The only thing I knew about publishing was, here's my book, print it and send me the money. So to learn more, I went to one of the local stores, probably Auntie's or maybe Barnes & Noble. And I bought The Idiot's Guide to Publishing. And boy, did I learn a lot. First of all, I learned that writers should band together, offer each other mutual help and support. And so the first writing group I found happened to be Spokane authors and self-publishers. this particular group. I joined it as soon as possible, even though at that time I wasn't really planning to self-publish. And I learned how publishing worked in general. That you have to query or pitch to agents, submitting work to those. If they were interested, then you move on. If you get an agent, then they're going to send it off to acquisition editors, and it's going to. And if they like it, it's going to go to an editorial board, and finally they might decide to publish your book. But I also learned that the publishing industry did not want a submitted manuscript to look like a printed or published book. They still wanted it to look like something made on a typewriter or something that could have been prepared on a typewriter, even if created on a computer. As the capabilities of the typical computer increased in the late 20th century, agents and other industry professionals probably began to receive submissions in a variety of formats. I mean, I wouldn't be the only one that didn't know any better and typed my manuscript up to look like a published printed book. And it was probably distracting to them. So they started insisting that manuscripts continue to look like manuscripts. Over time, certain fonts, font sizes, and other features were deemed to be equivalent to the old typewriter manuscripts. These guidelines then became known as standard format. So you can still do standard format with make it appear to be something that would be typed with an elite typewriter. You can also do it to make it look like it was typed with a packet typewriter. Not everything is exact, and one of the rules or things that did change is in the old days with a typewriter, if we wanted to italicize something, we couldn't italicize it, we would have to underline it. Well, now we can use the italics feature on our keyboard. So I reformatted that first book to standard format, and now I do most of my writing in standard format. To me, it's easier that way. And to a degree, my notes for this presentation are in standard format. And I'm going to email everybody a copy of these. And I also have a kind of a little guideline about standard format, which I didn't quite get finished yet. So when I finish that up, I'll send that along too. So any questions?
Is there a button in Word that you can push and it does standard format? Or do you have to do all the margins and the alignments and everything?
I think it might be, I haven't seen a button that just says standard format. And I know now if you open up a document in Word, the margins are at least to what they're normally supposed to be. You might have to change the font, maybe the line spacing. When I first got involved in this, the default font for Word was the one you would normally want, and now you'd have to typically change the line spacing or something like that.
I was going to ask you, what font do you use to make it look like a typewriter?
Courier.
Okay, yeah. If you want it to really look like a typewriter, use Courier or New Courier. It's one of the few computerized fonts that's actually still non-proportional, which means if you take a period and you hit a period all the way across your line, you're going to get the same number of periods as if you put a capital W all the way across. It gives the same amount of space per character, no matter how big the character is. But if you go to most other ones, like Times Roman, and you hit a period all the way across, you're going to get more than you would if you go with, say, a capital W. is proportional to the width of the letter itself. And Times Roman, Times New Roman is the font, are the fonts that you would use to emulate a elite typewriter. I think size 12. Courier, new Courier, size 12 would emulate a Pica typewriter. Anybody else?
He was saying if you go to tools, you can pick which formatting you want.
Format.
Somebody just said if you go to Tool, you can check the, you can select what formatting you want.
In tools, you can count your numbers and your pages. And in format, you can select your different fonts. I think that's how it goes.
Are you talking Word?
Word,
Word?
yeah. It's all that stuff is in the.
Oh, yeah, that's all
bar.
in there.
So,
Well, I would suppose that depending on our experiences and how much we've done, we might have different ways to get to what we want on that, so.
Yeah. There's more than one way to do
Oh,
just
yeah.
about anything in Word.
Well, for books, I use Word, but for stage plays or films or musicals or, I use Final Draft, and it has standard formatting for each of those different types of books.
Okay, if you didn't hear it, he was saying for books he uses Word, but he uses a different program for writing screenplays and stuff, and he has different
It has different formats.
different formats and stuff designed for it. And one thing I did hear someplace was that if you are writing a screenplay and or doing it without any of these special programs or formats, that they normally would want it in Courier or New Courier. Yes.
In standard format, is there any way of getting a picture on the page?
insert.
I would think that, technically, I think you can do it. I don't think it's what you should do when you're writing a manuscript. You would maybe want to make a note, put picture 5 here, then have a catalog of pictures to go with it.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
I'm sorry. This thing keeps dropping, and I can't. I was saying, I don't think you would want to try to put any pictures in something that's standard format. I would think if you had pictures to accompany a story, that you would maybe make a note, if you wanted that picture on page, or that text that's on page 5, put a note there, maybe in parentheses.
So I could put say a box there, is that right? No,
No.
I'm not quite understanding.
If
What
you-
we used to do at the newspaper,
Okay, let's see.
if we got articles in from other people,
Mhm,
they would send the pictures along as separate files
mhm.
and then tell us where to put them when we did the layout.
Okay.
That's how we did it.
But you didn't put that in directly?
No, not in with the words. The words are, I think, is that what you're talking about is for standard format is
Yeah.
the words that you're using. And of course with computers, it's a different story than it
Oh, yeah,
used to
because
be.
if you look at the newsletter, I put pictures in there all the time, all over the
Yeah,
place.
yeah.
But to do it on a standard formatted manuscript, I'm not sure exactly how or where you would indicate that a picture is supposed to go there.
You might have to just give instructions,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's been a while since I've done that, but we always had the pictures separate and we fit them in where it made sense.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm concerned with, is that they be close enough to the words that are describing the picture.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. But that's something that would, to me, would come in as part of the formatting for,
Yeah.
for print.
Okay.
It would not necessarily be the standard
So
format.
in standard format, you just do it and you don't
Right.
worry about it and then
Right.
have it, the information
Right.
attached to it in some way.
And that's where it's always good to get with a person that's doing it for you, if somebody's doing it for you, and tell them, here's my pictures. And maybe even on or with the picture file, you could have a section of the standard format reprinted in there, say, okay, this picture goes in the final setup where this part of the text is. I'm kind of ad-libbing up here because it's something that hasn't occurred to me because I don't have any pictures in my stories. So.
Yes, well, my writing really requires, because it's a historical thing, the pictures are very important
Yeah.
Right.
to the writing.
Well, I've seen a lot of stories, a lot of works like that. I'm not familiar with how that would
Sure.
work.
I understand.
Anybody else?
To insert pictures, there's a little button that says insert, and it has a drop-down menu,
Mhm.
and it says pictures, or a bunch of choices.
I can't hear you.
Okay, so in your toolbar, there is a little, I don't know, a tool called insert.
No?
You click on that, and then it has a drop-down menu, and it asks you if you want it from your device or
I'll
another
talk to you
source.
later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I
And
think,
that's still
I mean, that's what I do when I do the newsletter and a lot of stuff where I put pictures in. I think what we're talking about more is if we're setting up standard format, do we want to actually put the picture in there or do we want to
Yeah,
just
I
have?
did that in, my book, Legend of Flying Horses. I put pictures of horses and airplanes before each chapter start, and I just inserted those. Then the interior designer did what they had to do to make it work. So they're
Okay.
there.
Well, that's what I was saying. I think the main thing is to get with whoever you're working with on it and see exactly how they would like to do it or have you do it. And I'm still looking at the separation of standard format for manuscript as opposed to formatting to print a book.
Yeah, it's,
Okay. So physically, I mean, system-wise, it wouldn't be that hard at all to do it. I just don't know if it would be something you'd want to do based on what the people there would want, or if they would want to have the pictures with instructions of where to put it when they're formatting. If you're formatting it yourself for print, then go for it.
Yeah.
Dave?
Dave?
Would adding pictures into the manuscript be an editing function rather than just submitting a manuscript? Once the manuscript is submitted and accepted, then that would be editing, adding pictures. Does that sound?
Sounds reasonable to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
It's part of the layout
Yeah.
of the whole thing.
I was suggesting at first, when the question first came up, that maybe in the format, in the standard format, in the manuscript, to have a little note there, insert picture 5, this spot. And I don't know if they would want that or not. And again, that's why it's always good to check with who you're working with, if you're working with somebody else. And again, as I said, if you're doing it all yourself, do whatever you want.
Yep.
You don't necessarily have to write your stuff in standard format. I do it because it's just to me, it's the natural way of doing things now. Because when I get through with mine, I'm gonna go through and edit it and clean it up, get it as best I can. I'm gonna send it to somebody else, probably Sue if she's available, to go through and edit. And she, in my last couple of books anyway, she went through and did the setup for print. So, and formatted them to be a book rather than a manuscript.
Yeah, big difference.
So I think that's all I've got.
After these messages, we'll be right back. Take a break, folks.